I worked for an online university that was based in Cincinnati. But everybody who worked there lived all over the United States because it's online. So a lot of people, as Brigette, who's helping us today, were very kind. And when we used to gather all together, X number of times a year in Cincinnati, we would all work all day because they're bringing us in. It's an expense and we're working. But then at night, you could have dinner with whomever you wanted, or in room service in your hotel, or with somebody else. Anyway, this gentleman was very kind, spiritual, thoughtful, and each time I would come in, he would say, Arlene, let me take you to dinner, we can talk. It was wonderful. And he had a girlfriend, so that was awful too. That worked out just fine. I'm like, I have a radar. So, so in any case, I had lovely dinners. He was very intellectual. Remember the spiritual, peaceful, kind, all those adjectives. So we go to dinner. He takes me to a French restaurant. I love what girl doesn't like a French restaurant, and they've got the beautiful soft French music playing in the background, and the meals are all nice. And we happen to both eat meat, not a lot of meat, but mostly fish. But because we both ate meat, what we did was we used to share a meal. In other words, if you go to a restaurant and they give you a whole plate of food, you don't really eat much else.
That's right, you're splitting.
Exactly. So what happens is by ordering an appetizer, a salad, an entree, a dessert, I could eat one of every, piece of everything. So I was happy. So because they brought us the appetizer, and we're chit-chatting over the appetizer, and then they put out like the silverware that matches your meal. So we're having steak, keep that in mind. And so as we finish the appetizer, he says to me, Arlene, let me talk to you about something I really want to discuss with you.
What's coming?
What happened to the girlfriend? So, and you imagine these things, you don't know what you're doing. And I was with Howard for 100 years. What do I know? So he said, I want to talk to you about two things. One, I believe it might be time for you to move on. And two, you might want to think about staying in your home, because I have a big house, Now, those are the two things that people don't realize when they come up to you, and they want to be helpful in the kindest, most thoughtful rationale. They want to have something that they can help you with. But for those of you who remember Linda Blair and The Exorcist, for those of you who might have met, and the head is spinning, well, when somebody comes up to a widow and says, it's time to move on, or they say, you really should leave your home, it's too big, it's too expensive, you can't manage it, whatever they do, you really want to twist their head like Linda Blair. But you have to be polite. You go, okay, thank you.
Think about it.
For me, the words moving on meant I was leaving Howard someplace. Now, you read my book. That wasn't going to happen. So, he said it once, and I was sitting there, and I go, I'm polite, because he's taking me to dinner, and made all the arrangements, and I go, thank you, and I say yes. So then we start with the salad, and he says, Arlene, I want to go back to this conversation. You really need to start thinking about moving on. And now I'm starting to twitch. And he said, and you might want to think that your house is a lot to manage. So then what they did was they had brought, with the silverware, you got the dessert spoon and the dessert, and they bring the knife, because it's steak. You got it. So you know the knife in a steakhouse, how it's got a wooden handle and serrated edge, and I'm sitting there and I don't know what to do. And so now, for a third time, now I'm like baseball, 3 strikes and you're out. I think you just went as far as he can. I love him, he's handsome, he's thoughtful. Let me share something. If you tell me to move on, or leave my home once more, I am going to pick up this knife and thrust it at you. Now I've got Mr. Spirituality. And he just looks at me.
Yeah.
And it was dead silence, maybe like 45 seconds, which is a lot. And he was very smart and thoughtful. And he goes, well, you know, maybe you're never going to be able to move on, but I'll bet you can move forward. And with that, it was like a light bulb went off in my head. And I've done that my whole life. I know how to move forward. I don't know how the hell to move on, but I know how to move forward. Hence, telling the book. And I actually didn't title it, but as I sent it to the editor and then the business editor, and they all said, oh, moving forward. They just forward. And it was so funny. So, hence the title.
Are you still friends with him?
Yeah, very good.
Oh, good.
He knows, he's petrified.
Is he married now?
No, but they're like 7 years. It's one of these, they're partners.
Okay.
Oh, they're happy as can be.
And how many more books did you write?
Well, it's an odd question. What happened is, as a university person, I had written academic books. And so when you write an academic book, the publisher contacts you because they have a need. There's a reason.
That's right.
So I have a couple of books that are academic books, really reference books. Nothing like this. You write a reference book, you really plagiarize it.
Yeah.
But this, 3 years in the writing.
That's facts, this is emotional.
And yeah, it's just completely. And so when I'm writing my next book, which I'll tell you what it's about, but I won't tell you what it's about. In any case, I would like to read you 2 paragraphs. And then if you like questions, you can go, I'll answer whatever. Okay. So here's what I equate becoming a widow and the process. The best way I can describe the process of moving forward after losing someone so close to you is by comparing the process to a train ride. When you envision a train, you can picture a long line of compartments from the last to the first. As you progress in life, you slowly move from one of those compartments to the next, eventually shutting the door to the previous compartment and stretching your arm to the next compartment until it's time to move on again. But in that stretching, if any of you have ridden a train, when you close one door and you go to the next one, that area is like and it shakes every part of you. But sometimes it may feel as if you've moved from one compartment to another without ever having been aware that it occurred. Mostly you remember trembling across the unknown. When I lost the love of my life, I was keenly aware of every single moment, often as if it were in slow motion. I chose to open the door and reach for the next compartment, still being able to see the compartments behind me, but moving forward to the next one on my own. I find comfort in knowing I can always look back to see and remember everything inside, while I also know there is much more to do in the one I'm in now. So, that's
Very,
just
very well said, very good.
thank you. My
Very,
mother would be
very
very
well,
proud.
very well. I'm glad you remembered.
So I try to do that because however many compartments there are on a train, I don't know. But the fact that I keep trying and everything is hard. It's just what it is. So
That's
we
really
can do
life.
it.
That's really life.
Yeah, well, that's what you move from one office to the next, but you don't forget the other, you know. But it's such a moving moment. So, we can do whatever you like. You can ask me questions.
And you start with your questions and ask.
Okay.
And we can kind of go
And
around
it'll
the
be,
circle.
I just have 4 questions, and I can stop.
Yeah, she just has 4 questions, yeah.
Do you identify with any of these women, including myself, in the book, or are you more interested just in the stories that were there, which is fine also? Do you have any favorites of the stories? Because these were remarkable women. I never met these women.
What I like was the large, the difference.
The diversity.
The diversity that you had in the book.
I wish I could
All
take
ages,
credit.
all.
I can't take credit. This book really has what I call a life of its own. Because I wasn't going to write any book. And these 3 women who didn't know each other over the period of 3 years. And after the 3rd year at the Howard Guard, and one was my endocrinologist, because they've been watching my thyroid for 35 years. One was an assistant to the president of the university, and another one did something else. But all 3 who didn't know each other said, I'll never forget it. After the 3rd year, they said, what's your plan for this year? And I said, excuse me? They said, you have a process. I said, I have a process. They said, what'd you do in the 1st year? And of course I write about it, but I said, what I did, I fixed everything I couldn't fix when Howard was sick, because you can't have them bang on a wound, even if it's leaking when somebody's sick. And you can't Florida tending the house is a big deal, because we get terminals. But you have to leave the house because it's poison. So I couldn't take that. So the 1st year I fixed everything. And I knew nothing. I fixed everything. But it took a year. Because you say to yourself, okay, I'm going to do this in the spring. And then the spring happens, and you don't get to it. So you feel like you did something wrong. And then the summer happens, you don't get. But if you give yourself a year, there's a really good chance you'll get to it. So it took me a year. And then in the 2nd year, I figured, you know, I got to do a will. The house has to be put in my name, bank accounts.
Yeah.
So the 2nd year, I did everything, because I'm very profound. That's over paper.
So you didn't do that until the 2nd year?
2nd year.
Oh.
Everything in the 2nd.
Sick.
Yeah.
No, after he was gone.
After he passed, yeah.
In the 3rd year, I went upstairs and did everything upstairs. You know?
Wow.
So at the end of the 3rd year, these 3 women, independent of each other,
Yeah.
said, what are you doing in the 4th year? And the whole thing about a process.
Yeah.
And I said, I don't have a process. And they said to me, what'd you do the 1st year? What'd you do? And I went, oh, okay. They said, well, what's your plan? I said, well, actually, I was working outside. I was doing all the landscaping that was every day. Outside. They said, you see, you have a process. So I said, okay. And they encouraged me to write the book, because they all knew people.
So how old were you then during that time?
Well, he was 66, so I was 66.
See, you were still young.
But not when I started writing the book. They said I should write a book, and I didn't. And then, after the 5th year, I wrote the book. So I was like 71, however, it was hard. And I wrote the book. So those were the 3 women who told me to write the book. And then, going back, 3 months after he died, I then had to go to Cincinnati for a meeting. And the president of the university was very kind, took me to brunch. And on the way back from brunch, I was telling him all the things which you read, how it did for me to make my life move forward with no plan. And he said, well, Arlene, go home, this is 3 months later, and just jot them down. Not because you're going to write anything, but because you won't remember everything. So I went home and I took a piece of paper and I just jotted them down. Didn't look at it for 5 years. They became this book.
Wow.
But I just stayed at the top of the desk, and that was it. In the 5th year, before I went with my hairdresser, because I get my hair dyed, and you sit for 32 minutes when you got dye on your head. And they talked to you, what are you going to talk? So we talked about the book, you know. And he said to me, I have 2 women. And I'm getting to what you asked about diversity. I have 2 women who are clients like you. They lost their spouses. they fixed their houses, they stayed in their house, you would want to speak with them. And I said, why do I want to speak? I can't go around calling people and say, you're a widow, I'm a widow, do you want to chat?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Awkward. Right. So I said, but if you want to contact them, so, and there's a reason, one was Christian, one was Jewish. So they said, oh, please let her call me, we'll talk to her. And I start with, I'm not a grief case, it's not my skills, not my nature. But I talk about black, and they talked about how they were full. So they were two women. One had another friend, and she was a little older, and her husband died in a plane crash, which is quite a story because the husband goes off to work. But she got a call, and she was a painter, and she was painting a ceiling, like a picture with a ceiling. She was painting the ceiling, and they said, come home, your husband had an accident. She goes, well, he's in the hospital, where is he? Just come home right away. She stopped painting, she goes home, and as she's driving to the front door, she sees reporters and cameras. It's a plane pilot. He's a pilot.
Way to find out.
Yeah, I'm saying so. And she was an artist, very, very, very good. Then another friend of mine said, well, you know, I'm African American. You don't have any African American. I said, I didn't know, you know. I said, find an African American. She found me a friend of mine, an African American woman. Then someone said, well, you live in Miami, you don't have an Hispanic woman. I went, okay, find me an Hispanic widow. And they did, one by one. And I was in, as a member, as you mentioned, Spain and Portugal. I was in Portugal with friends, and they took me because they knew that I needed
That's
to
why you went on that trip, right?
Yes! So they took me, and as I had like 8 pages done, or 20 pages. I said, do me a favor, take a look at this, because her husband was busy. So she texts me and she goes, my cousin from Portugal, who lives in Paris, her husband died, she was a very young widow, and you don't have somebody with young children. So now I'm interviewing somebody with young children. And I did nothing. It's to do this.
You said you never met them.
No.
No? How did you tell me?
They arranged it. I said, ask them if they would like to speak with me. And everybody did. And I, you know.
So your book was God sent.
Yeah, but
You were supposed to write.
But yeah, the book had a life of its own, and I tried to explain that, but unless I go into it, you would not. And the best was my neighbor is gay. So she comes up to me, she goes, you know, Olin, we have gay widows. And I said, okay.
That's what I meant, the university was great.
And I did nothing to do this. But it's very hard to go, when you start going down the sad, which I understand, I live in that land, the sad, for me not to try to make you laugh. So I can say things to them that other people can't. Like one of them, also an African American girl, very young when her children, her name is Roslyn, she's in the book. She calls me up, this is after I finished the interviews, because now they're all my friends, right? They all think they're my friends.
Are we all your friends?
Absolutely. So she calls me up, absolutely, look, you got my book, that's all right. So she calls me up, and she's upset one night, and it's after the book, you know. She said, I have a problem I have to discuss with you. I said, anyway. She said, her husband was cremated. So she says, and I'm very upset because I have his ashes on the mantle, and the 2 little girls want him on the mantle so they could see him. And I really want him in the bedroom. I don't know what the heck.
I don't know how to help you with that.
But what I can do is, I said, you know, I live in Miami and Howard's buried in Naples. She said, yes, I know, you all know. I said, that's 2 hours. She said, you have the nerve to complain to me that you gotta go from the living room to the bedroom. I gotta take a friggin' bus.
Drive into a 2-hour drive.
I gotta take a bus for 2 hours,
Yes,
wait
2
for a
hours,
bus
yes,
to come
yes,
home.
yes, yes.
I said, I don't feel bad. And they start laughing. I said, so now when you gotta move, let the kid, I said, and also let me tell you something, you're like a movie waiting to happen. That stupid urn is gonna fall down and then you'll vacuum them up. So anyway, so that's the kind of relationship that you can have which you can't have if you don't do this.
Yeah.
So, is there anything I can answer for you?
No, she was just asking, I just answered. No, I think you did pretty well, and you did a great job telling us everything, and I don't know, is there anything else that I